Good morning, comrades. It is Saturday. What's going on here? We're doing a show on Saturday now. Just this once, I felt compelled. Just hang out a little bit. Maybe we can more or less have some fun more than hit. I mean, there's some news I want to get to, but today I'm definitely like looking for some fun more than anything. But before that, yeah, I do want to hit a couple stories, but first off, how's everybody doing today? How y'all doing? You having a good one? We have people in chat? No, we don't. I'm not going to start till people are here. There's no point. Oh, here's some good news. Union seeks vote of 87 workers at Nissan plant. Hello, Psycaster. How are you today? Welcome. Doing a little Saturday show. We usually do Monday through Friday at this time, but I decided to just hop on Saturday. And we're talking, well, right now, I got a story that I want to share that is about a union drive happening at a Nissan plant. Now, they have done efforts to organize Nissan workers in Mississippi. I actually talked about this with a guy when I went to the strike line for the UAW strike in 2019. It was out in Brandon, Mississippi, rather, right outside of Jackson. It was at a GM parts facility, and they talked about union drives that they tried to put together at a Nissan facility, and Nissan was unfortunately effective at doing union busting, and the union vote failed. And well, it looks like they're back at it again. Mississippi's right next door, just a little bit north of Mississippi. So let's take a look and let's see what's going on here. Nashville, Tennessee. A union wants to hold a vote for representation of fewer than 100 workers out of thousands at a Nissan vehicle assembly plant in Tennessee, a move the company opposes because the effort doesn't stretch more broadly across the facility's workforce. The International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, excuse me, a machinist and aerospace workers says an overwhelming majority of the 87 tool and die maintenance technicians at the plant in Smyrna, about 25 miles southeast of Nashville, have signaled their support for a union. The effort marks the latest foray in the uphill fight for unions to gain traction at foreign-owned auto assembly plants in the traditionally anti-union South. Okay, so this, like they say, is hundreds or 87 workers out of thousands in the facility. So this is sort of interesting. So these must be specialized workers. It says tool and die. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but essentially, like the regular line workers are not a part of this drive. So that's interesting. So what's likely to happen is, I mean, it's already started. The management at Nissan has already sort of signaled that they don't want, because right now, in order for this group to get a union, they're going to need to define what their sort of universe of people that are trying to organize are. And if they want to make it, just these tool and die workers, they're going to have to fight the boss, because the boss is going to want it to be defined for the National Labor Relations Board, who's going to oversee this election. They want that to be everybody. So it would be a lot harder to get recognition as a union that way. It'll be harder to get a vote. They would have to do a lot more organizing work. I would expect that to be the case, unfortunately, because of the way that bosses are able to kind of influence the NLRB a lot more than workers are. With the Biden administration, I imagine that will still be the case, despite the fact that there's a lot of, there's a lot of trouble that's going to be going through that. And Joe Biden, everybody fucking hates Joe Biden. Anyway, whether or not the vote can be held hinges on ongoing arguments in front of the National Labor Relations Board. An attorney for Nissan argued the employees are not sufficiently distinct from other plant workers during a virtual hearing Friday, reasoning that any unionization vote would need to extend to about 4,300 production and maintenance employees. Holy crap. An attorney for the union contended that the 87 employees have extremely specialized skills for a job that others at the plant cannot do, making them eligible for their own standalone union representation. Nissan does work with organized labor in the rest of the world, but votes to unionize broadly at the U.S. Two plants have not been close. Workers in Smyrna rejected a plant-wide union drive under the UAW in 2001 and 1989. The Japan-based automaker, other U.S. assembly plant in Canton, Mississippi, that's the drive I was telling you about earlier, rejected facility-wide representation by the UAW during a 2017 vote. Wow, I didn't realize it was that. Decent. Our history reflects that Nissan respects the rights of employees to determine. Yeah. Of course, we respect your right. We respect your right to a union. We're just going to fight you every step of the way before you get there, says management. The margin was closer in 2019 and 2014 votes at the Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where workers twice rejected a factory-wide union under UAW. The year after the 2014 vote failed, a group of 160 Chattanooga maintenance workers won a vote to form a smaller union, but Volkswagen refused to bargain. German automaker. So we're getting into other territory here. Let's give them some pretty good history of the area. At the Nissan plant this time around, the machinist union says workers have cited numerous workplace concerns, from forced overtime to increased healthcare costs. Laura Ewan, an attorney representing the union, said the workers were excluded from a buyout offer to plant employees in general because of hiring issues hiring people for specialized jobs. So there's definitely, I mean, as is ever the case in non-unionized workplace, there is health problems. There are workplace concerns, safety concerns. They're being forced to do overtime, increasing healthcare costs. This is what happens when workers, don't have power. So, obviously solidarity with these folks. Quote, a union contract will ensure fair wages, benefits, working conditions, and the ability to retire with dignity, and said lead campaign organizer Tim Wright, Machinist Union's Grand Lodge representative. So yeah, there you go. Shout out to those workers. Hopefully they can get, not just these machine workers organized, but also we can, get a drive going with the rest of that. Because it's a huge minority. A very, very small minority of the workers at the particular plant are going to be, part of this drive. Hopefully they can get, their universe defined to be that specialized line of work that those people do. If that happens, then they'll be in pretty good shape. And, hopefully that would create a situation where, people from other parts of the factory would say, hey, those people with that specialized work have a union. Maybe we need one too. We've seen, and I talk about this quite a bit, we've seen with the workers at the Alabama Amazon in Bessemer, the Amazon facility, that there has been an increase in inquiries for unionization, specifically at Amazon. I recall a story from this week that said that 1,000 other workers had gotten into contact with RWDSU, which is the union that's organizing those Alabama, Amazon workers, and they want unions too. So it's in Seattle, it's in San Francisco, it's in all across the country where there are Amazon facilities. So this could be the first domino. It can be the rock in the pond that causes the ripple effect. It could be all those things. So it's good news. It's a good story. I just worry that with this being sort of a such a small minority of people in the entire facility, that it might get crushed, and send the reverse example of, oh wow, this is what happens to unions at Nissan, and they get crushed. Now, I think it's worth the effort. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, I have another story that I was looking at. I actually just tweeted this one out. You can follow me on Twitter at Comrade Morning, or that's for Robert for the show account. You can also follow me on Twitter at Eminent Prof. Hello, with Shut. How are you today? How are y'all? How's everybody doing here today? Do you know how unions fight? Strong unions fights against inflation. I was reading a Jacobin article that said inflation went up a lot in the late 80s, I think, after a series of union busts, but they didn't explain why. Interesting. I don't know if there's a correlation. I would have to I'm not like an expert in economics, so I don't know the answer to something like that. But I'd be interested to learn if there is a connection between union busting and driving up inflation. I don't know. To be completely honest, that's not something that I, it's not something I specialize in. But if you find anything that is specific to that, effect, let me know, because I definitely want to read that. Let's see here. Here's one that I thought was really kind of haha in a, spiteful way. Bolivia ex-interim president Jeanine Áñez arrested over coup. So I guess it turns out, and who would have thought that, that would be the case. But coups are illegal in Bolivia. I know, that's weird, right? The former interim president of Bolivia, Jeanine Áñez, and several ex-ministers have been arrested. So just let me set this up. The president of Bolivia, Evo Morales, was essentially displaced by an effort that was partially funded by the United States to, it's very, very common to happen out there. The U.S. has this thing called the Monroe Doctrine that's been in place since the since James Monroe, which is what, the 5th president or 6th president, I can't remember. But essentially, it was a claim by the U.S., and it's been carried out fairly strongly ever since, that the Central and South America is essentially the U.S.'s backyard, and we can sort of we're the influence. We influence all over those areas, and as such, the U.S. has a very, very stellar history of backing coups in places like, most recently, I guess you could say, Bolivia, but also Honduras in what year is Honduras? 2009, I want to say, if memory serves. Fuera Añez, that means go away Añez, exactly. So the former interim president, but anyway, the reason that takes place is because there was more specifically, the reason that it takes place now is because, over the 80s and 90s, there was a wave of, either social democratic or communist governance. Yes, I got it, 09. Social democratic or communist or socialist governments, things that are not friendly necessarily to capitalism, have taken over in places like Venezuela, and Bolivia, etc. And I'm not exactly like an expert on the specifics of all these places. I know that there are some like authoritarian tendencies there or whatever, but I will it's definitely something that, for better or for worse, mostly for the better, challenges the the hegemony of the capitalist system in what is deemed to be, since the 1800s, the early 1800s, even the backyard of the United States. So, yeah, Hillary and Obama installed Joe. Yeah, exactly. I've actually gotten quite a few updates on that, and I don't quite I don't know the names of the particulars in Honduras quite as clearly, but it'd be good to talk about. Hope you're doing good, Antifa. Thanks for coming on a Saturday. I don't usually do Saturday shows, but appreciate it. I was hoping I was going to try to do a little bit of fun, but I want to get a couple stories out the way first. Delicious coffee. The former interim president of Bolivia, Janine Añez, and several ministers have been arrested. Prosecutors say that she and ministers took part in a coup against President Evo Morales in 2019, which, yes, absolutely, she did. Mr. Morales resigned and fled Bolivia after protests and allegations of electoral fraud. Ms. Añez has said that she is victim of political vendetta by Mr. Morales's MAS Socialist Party, which has since returned to power. What song is famous in your country? Animation Vibe. What song is famous in your country? Okay. The party won a landslide victory in presidential and congressional elections in October last year, paving the way for Mr. Morales to return to Bolivia from Argentina to take over the leadership of the MAS party. So essentially, there was a coup because of sort of juiced up protests, but partially juiced up by the U.S. The this woman, Janine Añez, sort of came in as leader. She's like the Juan Guaido of Bolivia, I suppose. Except she actually got to assume power for a certain amount of time. She became the caretaker leader of Bolivia for about a year and a half, 2 years. It was a while. And essentially she was an illegitimate leader because of there was no election fraud, and they refused to hold an election for several years, or for the period of time that she was in charge. And then when they finally did hold it, Morales wins, and now they're deciding that what the coup that she was a part of leading, is that coups are illegal. Can you believe it? His colleague, hold on. So the Mas Party won a landslide victory in presidential and congressional elections in October of last year, paving the way for Morales to return to Bolivia from Argentina to take over the leadership of the Mas Party. Yeah, she's a puppet. His colleague, Luis Arce, was elected president, though Arce stressed that in a BBC interview that he would pursue his own political path, saying that he was not Morales. As the most senior senator, Ms. Áñez became caretaker president after Morales fled, but members of the Hamas party accused her of being in cahoots with police and military figures of engineering the overthrow. She was detained in the early hours Saturday in the city of Trinidad. And yeah, they announced on Facebook that she was taken to La Paz. So coups are illegal. If you do a coup in Bolivia, you'll get arrested. But if you do them in the U.S., maybe not so much. Yeah, Áñez is the puppet of the hegemony. It's called Cheb Hansi. Is that the music that's playing right now? I got a little music playing underneath today. Is that what you're talking about? This? Let me know if it's too loud, by the way, because I'm trying to keep it, chilling low. Oh, there's my Twitter. Oh, I thought this was really funny, actually. So this is on Fox News the other day. I don't usually watch very much Fox News, but there was a bit of an awkward moment on The Five. Let's take a look.
Time now for one more thing.
I gotta pee.
You're on the air. Greg. Jesse, why don't you kick us off?
That was so funny. All right.
So why is he singing like he's on television?
One more thing.
Why is he singing about having to pee?
I gotta pee.
You're on the air.
Look at everybody else. They're just like trying to they don't know what to do.
Greg. Jesse, why don't you kick us off?
That was so
Just
funny. All right.
And the funny thing about this too is they're just coming back from commercial. So why is he would you think that he had I don't know, that's really strange to me too. He's just singing about having to pee after coming back from the commercial. Wouldn't that be the perfect time to go to pee? I don't know. I just thought that was hilarious. Just vibing with a full bladder. Exactly. Hey DS, how's it going? Vibing with the full bladder. That's exactly. I couldn't have said that better myself. Ridiculous. And look at Jesse Waters. He has to recover from this. Look at the look on his face.
I'll take Greg's slot until he has to come back from the bathroom. I want everybody to watch Fox News this weekend. I need you to start.
My favorite ever Jesse Waters clip. By the way, I have that one bookmarked for forever. I will always love this video. This is the best. This is the greatest video of all
20%
time. Well, not maybe the greatest video of all time, but it's fantastic. This is like in December when, like, right after Thanksgiving. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you do remember the COVID numbers had like seriously spiked, and there was consideration of like, locking back down. And this is what Jesse Waters is. This is what Jesse Waters had to say.
You're going to let them go after restaurants now? 20% of our restaurants have closed in this country for good. Where are we going to go out to eat?
Now we're talking about, this is when probably around 400,000 people had died of COVID. And this dude's like, where are we going to go out to eat? You're going to close restaurants now?
We're going to go out to eat. Going out to dinner is like the greatest thing about being an American. You want to cook? How'd that go during the pandemic? Not well. I mean, you go to a restaurant, you get apps, you get the bread is free, drinks. Hey, another round of drinks. You got dessert. I mean, it is one of the great.
All of those things are available in restaurants. You go out, you have free bread, you get drinks, let's get some drinks, bro. Oh shit, sorry.
Greatest pleasures of the American
even Greg Gutfeld, the piss boy himself right here, is just like laughing.
Got dessert. I mean, it is one of the greatest pleasures of the American experience. And if they start closing restaurants down, I just don't know how much longer people are going to be able to take this. And Biden has no plan to help these restaurants recover.
Restaurants.
You're going to let them go after
this is like 400,000 people. He's just talking about like the great times we have at restaurants or whatever. I don't know. So how's everybody doing? I'm kind of just sliding through some stories here, trying to see what the next best one would be. Wow. This is huge news. I mean, like, okay, let's look at this. So over the summer, George Floyd was murdered by police. And there were, protests across the country, specifically in Minneapolis, to essentially bring this up as a, huge issue of a broader problem of police and cops, like disproportionately, shooting and killing, black folks, mostly black men, not exclusively, obviously. But anyway, Minneapolis approves a historic $27 million settlement with George Floyd's family. Is that enough? Of course not. Does it make everything better? No. However, this is very interesting because the city council is giving up, $27 million of the city's budget to this. So let's read. The Minneapolis City Council approved Friday a $27 million civil settlement with the family of George Floyd over the black man's death in police custody last year. The city council voted 13-0 to approve the settlement, which directs $500,000 to be used to benefit the George Floyd Memorial site at 38th in Chicago. Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer who kneeled on George Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes. That's right, 9 minutes. He's standing trial on murder and manslaughter counts. 3 other ex-officers involved in the fatal arrest are charged with aiding and abetting and will be tried jointly in August. The family lawsuit was filed against the city on July 15th, alleging the 4 former officers violated Floyd's rights when they restrained him, CBS Minnesota reported. So this is really interesting from the perspective of, like, $27 million. $27 million. So if you think that like the city council isn't pissed at the cops for their behavior because of that, like for essentially draining, even if they don't care about George Floyd's as the person, which they very well may not, but regardless of that, the fact that they lose $27 million out of the city's budget is financial reason enough to not do that kind of shit, to not murder people. So even if in like the most cold of analysis, this could potentially be, and then plus the family gets the money, which is, I mean, again, not enough. However, it's remarkable that this is happening. There's video. Let's take a look. After the
This
flip
is a
and flap an
classroom.
ad. Yeah, Fox is a bunch of sociopaths. Yeah, yeah, they are. Some enlightenment from Jesse Waters. Yeah, Jesse Waters is like a character. I don't know. I'm a sicko, and I enjoy all of that weird crap that they do over. I don't know what my problem is. Like, I think it's very funny.
So much. While I'm relieved that the settlement has been taken care of, I'd like to thank the Minnesota. I'd like to thank our legal team for standing with us throughout all times, especially Ben. Ben has been here with us.
That's Ben
for
Crump.
So
He's a
long,
very famous civil
throughout the
rights
time
lawyer.
that I need to speak with him at night about my brother, about different things. So I thank the state of Minnesota for getting this settlement taken care of. But even though my brother is not here, he's here with me in my heart. Because if I could get him back, I would give all of this back. Him, I know that he's with us and he's standing up right now knowing that we have the opportunity to be able to fund low-income African-American communities. And that's big in our heart as my family stand here because we are a product of our environments. We come from low income. We come from the CUNY homes. We're a big family. I'm gonna miss my brother. The world, he has made a movement and everybody is standing with us in solidarity. And I wanna be able to thank all the supporters, all the protesters, for standing, especially during a pandemic where you didn't have to.
Yes.
You put your lives on the line.
Yes.
There's nothing I can do to be able to repay you for that because you showed who you are and who you were at that time.
That's really cool that
So,
he's like talking very positively about the protesters.
one thing that the world needs to know, America, we need to heal. This nation needs healing. Our family needs healing. There have been times where I had to go and see my brother because he had tears pouring out his eyes thinking about our brother. So everybody around this world who have marched with us on the front line or on the couch, it doesn't matter. Your heart was in a good place. And I like to thank everyone for that. Thank you all so much. May George live in power.
That was really great. That was really
Homeowners, this incredible
nice statement by the brother. And that was really nice. So yeah. Fox is a bunch of sociopath fascists, yeah. So it's good that the family's getting the money. They're going to do, it sounds like, very good things with it. And like I said, Benjamin Crump, who's the lawyer there, is usually involved with these kinds of cases. I know that he was involved with, I believe it was even all the way back in Trayvon Martin and what was that, 2011. He's always kind of on the scene and doing the good work. So that's good. Considering this is a Saturday show, I did want to kind of take things a little bit easy. So I did have this video that I've actually been waiting to watch, and I figured I could watch it with y'all. It is a video on why America can't handle a crisis. This is by Second Thought. Let's take a look at their YouTube creator on here. I watched some of their things. They usually do a video like about once a week, and let's do maybe some reacts to that.
Episode was made in collaboration with Ugopnik. Be sure to check out their video after this. If you were born at any point after the 80s, odds are the entirety of your lived experience has been one of crisis. For people my age, our formative years were filled with the consequences of U.S. activity. Our earliest memories include 9/11 and the invasion of Iraq under false pretenses.
So for me, yeah, I was born in 84, and 9/11 was like, well, the first thing I remember seeing, like when it came to like crazy crises, well, I guess it wouldn't be a crisis in the same way, but like it was definitely like, shit ain't right. The 2000 election where, Bush, I was in high school when this happened. I was like a freshman or sophomore, and just like watching all of this shit like go sideways and eventually essentially see the Republicans steal an election. So like I kind of define like my own like development over the years, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this. 2000 election, the 9/11. I was a junior in high school when 9/11 happened. Hurricane Katrina in 2005, because I live in New Orleans area. I got to see the complete and utter destruction of my home. I was able to get out, luckily enough. Many people were not, but also complete and utter failure of the government to do anything to help those people in any meaningful way over many years. And also in the immediate sense, I mean, getting people out of there very specifically. Then 2008, the financial crisis, and just on down the line, it's sort of I can't help but think that that sort of like series of events led me to where I'm at, and like how I sort of think about things. So let's go on.
Then we had the 2008 housing crash, the realization that climate change was nearing a point of no return, the acceleration of suicidal deregulation and privatization, which has left our infrastructure weak and fragile, the skyrocketing cost of tuition, saddling young people who were told college was the only way to succeed with insurmountable debt and increasingly worthless degrees.
It's still like that. Like I teach in elementary school, and we're like 4th and 5th grade special ed, and we still beat college into people's heads. And like, I'm not trying to make any kind of a case like against college or whatever, but like this singular focus on college essentially is feeding kids into a debt cycle. Yeah, that's another part of it too. That it does go all the way back to Vietnam. Oh yeah, and the Iraq War too, by the way. I mean, like forgetting about that, 9/11, the Iraq and Afghanistan war specific. I mean, like both of them were awful for sure, but the Iraq War had literally nothing to do with. I mean, Iraq had literally nothing to do with 9/11, but we decided to go to war with them anyway, just because we wanted to and we want the resources, et cetera, et cetera. Like that. How can I forget about that? Speaking of blowback, there's a podcast called Blowback that's on that topic. Anyway.
Degrees. We've seen the birth and rapid rise of the gig economy, relegating huge portions of the population to precarity and poverty. And of course, we've watched our COVID response become the worst in the world, despite having advanced knowledge of the danger and plenty of resources to handle the situation appropriately. For millennials and younger generations, there's no such thing as the good old days. We never experienced them. We'll cover that topic more thoroughly in a future video, but in this week's episode, we're going to examine why the US seems to be completely incapable of handling crises. Now, this video could easily be over an hour long. The past few decades have seen an alarming acceleration in crisis mismanagement, and it would take way too long to cover them all. We're just going to focus on a handful of them. Before we get to the big ones, let's start with a very American problem: obesity. At first glance, you wouldn't necessarily think to call obesity a crisis. But when you look at the numbers in the US, things become a bit more grim. As of 2018, 42.4% of all American adults were obese. That number,
And that sort of speaks to something that Andrea talks about a lot, is that sort of like, she says it in a lot sharper terms than I would, but the like broad, like the diet of people in the US is essentially designed to, it's not necessarily designed to make you particularly healthy, I guess you could say. That's a nice way to put it. And yeah, the gig economy sucks, but oligarchs for everybody, including folks in Silicon Valley / technology. It doesn't suck for them. They do pretty good on that, don't they? Everybody but the oligarchs. Gotcha. Yeah. No, that's 100% right. And they're the ones that are forcing the gig economy upon us because they get to make millions of dollars off of it. Of course. Yeah, 100%.
increased drastically between 2000 and 2018, shooting up by nearly 12%, while severe obesity nearly doubled from 4.7% to 9.2%. Obesity among children is also a big problem. Of children between the ages of 2 and 19, nearly 1 in 5 are obese. Now, obesity doesn't just mean you're a bit overweight. It's a serious health condition, and it comes with a whole slew of problems. Heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and increased susceptibility to certain types of cancer, not to mention a lower quality of life and shorter average lifespan. The fact that nearly half of American adults are obese should be a huge red flag. According to one study conducted in 2008, the estimated annual medical cost of obesity in the US was a staggering $147 billion.
Jesus, it costs so much money to be like unhealthy, and it costs more due to the medical side of it. And then also, I mean, like, it sucks. You feel lethargic, all these other things. And I'm not like trying to be prescriptive. This is a structural social problem that is something that needs to be addressed at a policy level, not necessarily. I mean, it can be addressed at an individual level, and people who can do that should. However, like this is definitely, and I think I like the way that Second Thought's framing this, is not like assigning blame to people for this, which is very good. It's horrible that it's a horrible diet that literally requires extra time to be able to ensure that your intake isn't full of poison and added sugars. Yeah, I mean, that's like almost. I mean, it's not quite like a second job or anything like that. It's not easy to necessarily do all that stuff all the time. But yeah.
And judging by the increased prevalence of obesity in the years since, we can only assume that cost has risen dramatically. Obesity causes nearly 1 in 5 deaths in the US. That's a crisis, and it's not talked about nearly enough. Now, some people will simply tell those suffering from obesity to eat better. And
like, literacy on this issue can help, but it's not going to help like on the broadest possible scale. Like there needs to be a policy solution to this.
That's not unreasonable. But the roots of the crisis go far beyond individual responsibility. Back in the 50s, President Eisenhower...
Actually, that's probably not true. They feed all kinds of fucked up shit to livestock. Like, they'll... I don't even want to get into the specifics, but like factory farming is a nightmare. Like, oh God. But and then we end up eating the stuff that eats that. So it does get passed along.
Eisenhower had a heart attack, which sparked a scientific debate over the causes of obesity, which was known to cause heart disease. There were 2 main schools of thought, one led by British physiologist and nutritionist John Yudkin, and the other by Ancel Keys, an American physiologist. Yudkin believed that obesity was mainly caused by sugar, and Keys thought it was caused by fat.
Not just awareness, Antifa. We need to like change the way that our entire agricultural and food distribution system is constructed. Like, it needs to be torn down and rebuilt from the bottom.
Eventually, it became apparent that Yudkin was correct. Sugar was the culprit behind the condition. But wait, if we identified the cause all the way back in the 50s, why is the problem so much worse today? Well, the sugar industry didn't take kindly to the scientific findings. They funded disinformation campaigns and lobbied the government to support the low-fat diet initiative in an attempt to maintain their profits. This not only helped them keep their current profits, it also drastically increased them because in order to make low-fat foods appealing to an American palate, manufacturers had to add more sugar. So, the result of a scientific study clearly linking sugar to obesity was not the reduction of sugar in our diets, but a massive disinformation campaign that ended up increasing the amount of sugar in our foods, thereby worsening the very problem we wanted to solve. Keep this result in mind, because you'll begin to notice a pattern. So, what have we done to combat obesity in the decades since the initial studies? Well, not much. Some states have tried to implement sugar taxes, but on the whole, we haven't even made a dent in the crisis. It's only getting worse. In the case
Dude,
of
sugar
obesity,
is so
not
addictive.
only have we failed.
Sugar is so unbelievably addictive. I know that there's a book that's on the history of the like introduction of sugar to the West. I'm gonna have to find that book. History of sugar. But essentially, like, because before the Columbian Exchange and the sort of production of sugar happened, there was no sugar in the West at all. There was no sugar in, well, I say the West. I'm talking about in Europe and all these other places. It was always in America, but it wasn't always like, it wasn't refined at an industrial scale. It wasn't farmed at initially a plantation and then industrial scale. It was much more niche. But then when you introduce this drug to the broader world, and it's able to be produced at a an industrial level eventually, then you get like a huge change in how everything goes. I kind of think about, like, I don't know, that's really fascinating to me in particular. I'm gonna have to find like some information on that, and we can get on that. But it's essentially like the Europe and all those other places got addicted to sugar really, really fast.
Failed to handle it, our capitalist system caused it. A giant industry wanted to keep making money.
Prions, what is they've been tricking the population into eating prions with added sugar with their mercury amalgam dental fillings for decades. What is a prion? I don't know what a prion is. I've got a lot of fillings, so if I'm exposed to mercury, maybe I've developed a tolerance.
Money, so they threw the American people under the bus.
Yep.
And we've been dealing with the same problem for well over half a century.
That's something that happens a lot too. Like, it happens with cigarettes and smoking. They have an industry push to sell cigarettes, and then they sort of individualize the problem. Oh, well, you're the one that's smoking. We have an industry push to produce and distribute sugar. Oh, well, you're the one that's doing that. You're the one that's choosing to eat the sugar. We have an industry. We have a large industry-wide disinformation campaign about pollution and use of energy. Oh, we're going to talk about carbon footprint on the individual. What's your individual carbon footprint? It is like it's an extremely effective and extremely pernicious approach to make everything about individuals. Sugar literally fueled colonialism, and capitalism is built on the commodification and privatization of chattel slavery and genocide, unfortunately, and that's undeniable. Yeah, that is undeniable. That's 100% undeniable. I mean, if you ever hear about what a sugar, like essentially producing sugar, like taking the cane and turning it into refined sugar, it will make your hair stand on it. And it's so absolutely barbaric. Like, I mean, it wasn't just in Haiti, but like the Haitian Revolution in part was because of the absolutely like medieval conditions of the sugar plantations. Sugar fuel the Dutch West India Company as well as the Royal African Company and all kinds of horrible colonial slavery. Yeah, for sure. Prions give you mad cow disease, aka Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, and they're broken pieces of protein. Never heard of it, but I'm sure that they're bad. It doesn't sound very good.
Now, let's move on to one of the big crises. one that affects not only the US, but the entire world: climate change. Whether you think
Oh,
humans are
okay.
influencing the climate change or not, the data is clear. Our climate is changing dramatically and rapidly. Sea ice is melting at unprecedented rates, causing a rise in sea level. The oceans are becoming more acidic, leading to the annihilation of coral reefs. Violent weather events have become far more common, and we're beginning to see thousand-year storms, droughts, and floods every few years. Thousands of species are at risk of extinction. Disease is able to spread farther and faster thanks to longer warm seasons, and entire regions are becoming unlivable. In early 2020, I helped shoot a documentary called The Final Years of Majuro, which documented the effects of sea level rise in the Marshall Islands.
Oh,
I saw
God.
firsthand what will happen to the world's coastal regions and islands. They're going underwater. Their populations will have to evacuate or be destroyed. Since the US likes to think of itself as the leader of the world, surely we're at the forefront of climate change mitigation, right? Well, no. In
Wrong.
fact, we're not even close.
Oh
They-
my God! It's James Inhofe with the snowball in Congress. This motherfucker right here is like super tied up to the fossil fuel industry, and one time, like it like was a horrible snowstorm or something like that, and he decides to go and bring in a snowball from outside to prove that climate change isn't real. Absolutely incredible. What an absolute king.
The United States is one of the few places on Earth where elected officials openly deny the existence of climate change. The climate doesn't care whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. Or, to quote a certain internet person, facts don't care about your feelings. We have the facts.
And
Climate
Japupu.
change is happening. So why do our politicians, even the ones who acknowledge the crisis, refuse to address the problem? You won't be surprised to learn that once again, corporate interests stand in the way. In order to understand the present situation, let's take a trip back to the late 70s. Towards the end of the decade and into the 80s, Exxon was at the forefront of climate research.
Exxon
Not because
Valdez.
they particularly cared about the planet, but because they wanted to understand the effects of the changing climate to better position
Okay,
themselves
not the
against
Exxon Valdez.
competition
This
in
is
the future.
their they did research on climate change, and they basically were like, climate change is real, we better cover this shit up. A prion is just a malformed protein that goes to your brain and gives you degenerative neurological disease like mad cow, and it's one of the main reasons why you should avoid meat. Oh, well.
For example, when they began drilling in the Beaufort Sea in the Canadian Arctic, Exxon scientists wondered whether the increased CO2 emissions would warm the region enough to make the voyage and extraction less treacherous, and therefore more profitable. With goals like these in mind, Exxon began conducting some of the most thorough climate change studies to date. Between 1986 and 1992, the company used and developed cutting-edge models to understand the effects of CO2 and other greenhouse gases on the climate, accumulating incredibly valuable data. To use the Beaufort Sea example again, Exxon scientists determined that should atmospheric CO2 concentration double, and they predicted it would by 2050, the region's open water season would lengthen from 2 months to 3, possibly even 5. They underestimated how quickly atmospheric CO2 would accumulate, but they were exactly correct about the lengthening of the Beaufort open water season. And this is just one example. Their models also accurately predicted rising temperatures, dramatic weather, severe
So these
ice loss,
motherfuckers
droughts,
knew about
floods,
climate change.
and all manner of other
These motherfuckers knew about climate change in the 70s, and they still fucking lied about it, and they're still lying about it.
consequences to their actions. And all of this was collected not with the intention of curbing the fallout, but of understanding how they could best position themselves to take advantage of the changing climate. As discourse around climate change heated up, so to speak, Exxon was in a position to do some real good. They had some of the best data available, and it would have made a huge difference in understanding how best to mitigate the consequences of climate fallout. Instead, they chose to do the same thing the sugar industry did. They funded opposition groups, launched disinformation campaigns, and buried their own internal studies so that the public would never learn what they had discovered. For decades, Exxon and other oil and gas giants
Absolute fucking ghouls, like diabolical, like movie villain type shit. This is Second Thought. I'll drop the link in the. I'll drop the link after the video after it goes. Actually, here it is. I can drop the link right now. They do a video like once a week. They do really good work.
paid huge sums of money to suppress the facts and lobby politicians to sow confusion and distrust of established science. It wasn't until the mid-2000s that Exxon finally distanced themselves from some of the more
The
outspoken climate denial
1800s?
groups, like
Okay, I'm gonna need a source on that, because if that's true, holy fuck, like, good lord. Oh my god, I believe it.
the Competitive Enterprise Institute. But to this day, they play a major role in subverting the effort to do anything at all about climate change. And they continue to fund climate-denying politicians who help secure oil and gas profits,
Like
to
James
the
Inhofe.
detriment of the entire human race. Exxon denies this, of course, but if you'd like to see the evidence for yourself, I've left links to their internal documents and to an investigative study on the matter in the description. Today, thanks in no small part to the greed of fossil fuel companies, we are years behind where we should be when it comes to mitigating climate fallout. Heck, in the
I've seen maps of like what Louisiana is going to look in like 2050. I live in Louisiana, just outside of New Orleans, and we like essentially like the maps that look like what we're going to be like here in like 50 years or something like that. Is that half the state is just going to be underwater?
US, we can't even agree it's happening at all. So again, just like with the obesity crisis, we're not only incapable of solving the problem, our capitalist system created the problem. Let's move on to our final big crisis, coronavirus. We're now right around the 1-year mark for when Americans really began to realize just how serious the problem was. In the past year, over 500,000 Americans have died of COVID. We've had more cases and more deaths than anywhere else on Earth. This is despite the fact that we have almost limitless resources to spend on overcoming crises like this one. If we're really the greatest country on Earth, why has our coronavirus response been one of, if not the worst in the world? As always, to better understand the situation, we need to rewind a bit. When COVID first came to the States, the official response, as with climate change, was denial. It immediately became a political issue. If Trump were to take the necessary measures to ensure the public's safety, he believed he would have tanked his approval rating and his economic numbers. Unsurprisingly, both tanked anyway after Americans started dropping like flies. But the story of our COVID response is not just about politics. A disease outbreak is perhaps the only thing able to reveal all the little cracks in the country's armor at the same time. Conservatives declared we didn't want to go into lockdown because that was government overreach, a rallying cry taken up by conservative voters. Of course, the politicians and wealthy business moguls didn't really care about government overreach. They just wanted to make sure American workers kept working so the executives could maintain their profits.
Yep.
Once it became apparent that we would have to enforce some kind of lockdown, things started to snowball. Many American businesses operate on razor-thin margins to reduce.
Well, not just that. They had like there was awareness that COVID was going to be a huge problem and it was going to crush the economy. Like Kelly Loeffler and I can't remember who the other senator. I think Feinstein was implicated. Dianne Feinstein was implicated, a Democrat, because they had sold off like a huge number of stocks right before the COVID crash, because of the COVID economic crash, because they knew that it was going to be horrible and it was going to be a disaster. And they basically made or saved themselves millions of dollars because they sold their stocks before they would tank, because they had inside information because they were members of Congress.
Costs and maximize profits. So when they lost business, they immediately had to lay off their workers in order to weather the storm. Since American healthcare is tied to employment, those millions of workers suddenly found themselves without a paycheck or access to medical care if they became sick. You know, something that happens quite often in a pandemic. Since our country lacks even the barest provisions for the unemployed, millions of households soon ran out of money. They couldn't pay rent. Landlords are some of those people who run dangerously lean operations, relying on their tenants' rent checks to pay off their properties. They begin to evict their tenants. Over the next few months, millions of Americans contract COVID. And our bizarre obsession with freedom led many to refuse to wear a mask.
Oh my God, the anti-mask protests! Holy crap! We need to open up the economy so I can get my nails done.
A tiny, simple piece of cloth that's proven to be effective in helping prevent the spread of disease.
Oh, the anti-maskers.
Our case numbers exploded, becoming the worst.
I was at the Capitol, the Louisiana Capitol, for the so before they opened up schools. This was in like early August or late July. I can't remember which. They were passing a bill that would essentially like make it easier to open up schools. Yes, they are. Yes, and landlords are not. They're not even like necessarily capitalism. Like landlords are basically like feudalism still. They're lords. But anyway, we were at the Capitol in Baton Rouge, and we were talking about like why they didn't need to be opening schools and why it was more difficult. And some parents showed up with their kids not wearing masks, talking about how masks would make their kids like permanently harm their kids because you breathe in your own carbon dioxide or some crazy shit like that. And like these are people that were like came up to us after, like when we were saying we need to keep the schools closed, and they agreed with us. And I'm just sort of like, what the fuck, like don't talk to me.
First in the world.
And I am
Hospitals
not
were
a don't talk to me type person. I'm a talk to everybody kind of person.
overrun. We had to start digging mass graves. The people who could get a hospital bed could no longer afford the medical bills because they didn't have insurance. Hundreds of thousands of people went into tremendous debt because the US is the only developed country not to have some form of universal health care. While the country was falling apart, Democrats and Republicans alike continued to make the situation worse. Republicans railed against mask mandates and asserted that the disease was no worse than the flu, or that it was a Chinese
Lauren
hoax.
Boebert,
And
Marjorie
the Democrats
Taylor Greene.
paid lip service to
Oh,
the science,
fucking
but
Cuomo,
lied
that
about
son
how
of a
well
bitch.
they were handling their city's outbreaks. But the politicians are not the only ones to blame. The general public must bear some of the shame as well. Despite mountains of data on both how dangerous the disease is and how other countries have been able to contain it, Americans flock to beaches, parties, restaurants, and the Super Bowl because, damn it, it's my God-given right as an American. Our bullheaded stubbornness and genocidal selfishness has
Look at this
contributed
hog.
countless bodies to the pile. How many of you watching have lost a loved one?
Of course,
Their death
of course,
was
one of the Florida teams would go to the Super Bowl in the year of in this particular year.
completely avoidable. Take countries like Vietnam or New Zealand.
So many Florida
These
men.
places absolutely destroyed the virus. Despite Vietnam's proximity to China, COVID rolls in and
The propaganda has crafted petty bourgeois into utter idiots who are addicted to tropes that validate their own narrative. They're trained to kiss up and kick down. Yeah, I mean, they have a position in the hierarchy that they don't want to give up. 100%. Small business tyrants. Thank you, Psycaster.
and they're like, nope, not going to let this happen. They implement strict
Well, I'm
lockdown
gonna
measures,
end this
social
stream
distancing,
after this video and probably send us over to Andrea's stream. We're running a little bit over what we usually do, but I wanted to finish this video first. But I can definitely pick this up for either tomorrow or Monday.
contact tracing immediately. Would you like to see their COVID stats compared to ours? Here you go. Pretty stark difference. To those of you who feel the need to say, well, they have a smaller population, take a look at the per capita death rate. Vietnam has about a third of the US population, so we would assume that they'd have a third the number of deaths, right? Not even close. Vietnam, a country with a GDP of $261 billion, absolutely destroyed the US, a country with a GDP of $20 trillion, in terms of COVID response effectiveness. Of course, you won't hear about this. It's not the first time the US has decided not
Vietnam
to talk
beat us
about being
again.
beaten by the Vietnamese. So yes, by all metrics, the US coronavirus response has been among the worst in the world, quite possibly the worst considering the resources we have at our disposal. This perfect storm of capitalist fragility laid bare the failures of the most powerful nation on earth. The country, like so many of its businesses, operates on the tiniest of margins. If we can save a single dollar by not having enough hospital beds or PPE for an emergency, we're gonna do it. If we can make more money by extorting our citizens when they need to go to the doctor, we're gonna do it. Social safety nets cost money, so they're out of the question. So are maternity leave, benefits, pensions, and fair wages. Every single aspect of our modern life is meticulously crafted to yield ever-increasing profits. And the tiniest grain of sand in the gears of this machine completely destroys our fragile equilibrium. We're not equipped to handle crises because crisis management isn't profitable. We just ignore our problems and hope things work out. This is fine for those at the top. They have the wealth to weather a year-long crisis. 99% of Americans do not. What is it going to take to get the people of this country to realize that not only can we not handle crises, our predatory capitalist system actively causes the crises? Capitalism cannot and will not solve the problems it creates. We have a
So the only answer to that question is to provide a tangible and realistic alternative. You can't just say, and I'm not like blaming Second Thought here, but you can't just say like, oh, well, this doesn't work. You need to have an alternative that they'll find acceptable. So you definitely do need to have stuff like this to talk about how it doesn't work, but you also need to have a vision of a better world in mind so that you can push that forward as well.
homelessness crisis at the same time as an excess of housing. Why? Housing the homeless isn't profitable. We maintain low-level wars for decades at tremendous cost of human life. Why? Because war is profitable. The military-industrial complex is one of our biggest industries. It's why we ignore humanitarian crises like the war in Yemen. The United States arms the people
We
responsible
fund
for the massacre.
the war in Yemen.
What happens when the next crisis is worse? How many Americans have to die before we realize that capitalism is destroying us? We already have another ticking time bomb on the horizon. Each successive generation is less well off than the previous one. Older generations, those who experienced the final years of comfort for the average American worker, are dying off. Younger people don't have the buying power their parents and grandparents did. We're having fewer children, mostly because we can't afford to raise children. Fewer children means fewer people to grow up and buy things. What happens when a country built on consumerism runs out of people to buy those products? Consumption falls off a cliff, GDP plummets, businesses flee to other countries, poverty skyrockets, and the American empire implodes. It's not some innate characteristic of the US that makes us incapable of handling crises. Any country with a system as hyper-capitalist as ours would suffer similarly poor performance. If you look around the world, there are plenty of mostly capitalist countries that handled the pandemic much better than the US. What's the difference? They have their guardrails intact. Social safety nets, robust unemployment assistance, universal healthcare. Their citizens are more secure, their businesses less predatory.
There he is providing
They
the
haven't
alternative. Good job.
deregulated and
Good job,
privatized
second
their
thought.
countries into oblivion. In America, we've removed those guardrails and stepped on the gas. After all, the biggest profits are right at the edge of the cliff. Capitalism is why we can't handle crises. If you're familiar with my channel, you know that my
That was a good video. Apparently, there's a part 2 by another creator. I don't know, Ugobnik. I don't know Ugobnik, but I might check that out another time.
Hello again, Tavash.
Oopsie. Here's the link to the Ugobnik video. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. You can check us out on here. We also have a podcast, Good Morning Comrade. You can check us out on, all the things, iTunes, Apple, Podbean, whatever. You can also support our show by going to patreon.com/Good Morning Comrade. I am going to jump to good old Cyber Demon 531. There's the link to her channel. I'm going to be in chat over there. But yeah, until next time, love you. Bye.